Roy Sy. I'm chairman of the Wooddale Commission. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Dr. Madonna.
Here.
Mr. Peterson.
Here.
Mr. Petrella.
Here.
Mr. Russo. Mr. Russo. Milano, I'm sorry. It's Italian. Mr. Milano. And Mr. Woods.
Here.
Chairman Sy.
Here. I declare quorum present. We have one public hearing scheduled for tonight. All testimony will be given under oath. At the hearing, there will be an opportunity for the public to offer testimony and to comment. Following the public hearings in each case, our deliberations will be open to the public in the sense that all are invited to listen and to watch. The public, however, may not speak during our deliberations. The Unified Development Ordinance requires a prevailing vote by a majority of the members of the Community Development Commission for those matters that will be referred to City Council for approval, and for those matters which the Community Development Commission will make the final decision. We ask that the applicants here tonight provide a general description of their proposals and then give specific evidence to demonstrate that the applicant proposal meets the standards of the Unified Development Ordinance for the relief requested. The burden is on the applicant to prove the case. With respect to others who wish to speak, you may give an opinion or present specific evidence as to why you believe the applicant meets or fails to meet the standards for the relief requested. Finally, we will strictly adhere to the schedule prepared for tonight's meeting. In the case of an applicant or in the event you or your attorney have filed an appearance as objector, you will be afforded sufficient time within to present your evidence. Whether you're a member of the public wishing to make a statement for the record or a witness testifying on behalf of the applicant or an objector, you will be placed under oath and then begin by stating your name and address. If you're not presenting evidence on behalf of the applicant or an objector, your remarks will be taken after the applicant and all those who have filed appearance as an objector have presented all their evidence. You will be subject to question by the Community Development Commission and the applicant or objector. To allow as many people as possible to be heard, if you're not an applicant or objector, we would request that your remarks be limited to 5 minutes. If additional time is needed, the hearing will be continued to the next available hearing date. I will now call this meeting the first matter before us. Okay, the first hearing we have is case number 13-V2 13Z1 in regard to the petition of Stanislaw Jasko for rezoning of property subject to from the R1 real estate, R1 estate residential district to R2 large lot single family district, and a variation from the 125 minimum lot depth as required pursuant to Article 6, Chapter 7 of the Municipal Code of the City of Wooddale. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Dr. Madonna.
Here.
Mr. Peterson.
Here.
Mr. Milano. Mr. Petrella.
Here.
Mr. Woods.
Here.
And Chairman Sy.
Here. I declare a quorum present. John or Jennifer, please indicate whether a notice of the hearing in case number 13B2/13-Z1 was published, and whether as secretary you have the certificate of publication from the newspaper.
Yes, it was placed, and I do have the certificate.
You have to be,
Your name, please. You
Oh.
have to attest to it.
Sorry, Jennifer Hennigan, and it was placed.
and you have to be under oath.
You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
And was a sign or posted on the property of the dimensions and lettering size and with the information required by the zoning code?
Yes, the sign was placed.
Is the petitioner present? Please allow yourself to be placed under oath and then present information relative to the petition and the standards set out by the Wooddale Unified Development Ordinance for the requested rezoning and variation.
Would you state your name and address?
Yes, for the record, my name is Marshall Subach, S-U-B-A-C-H. I'm an attorney for the petitioner. My office is at 1035 South York Road in Bensonville, DuPage County, Illinois.
Would you raise your right hand?
I will.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. Mr. Chairman, I might have two other people testify. Would you like to swear them in now?
Okay, swear them in now.
You stand right there.
Will each
They
of
can
you,
state their names
Sure.
and addresses.
My name is Ed Pazowinski, 11 Liberty Drive, Lamont, Illinois.
and
Stan Giselle, 5 North 012, Woodday Road.
would you each raise your right hands and swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Mr. Chairman, I have a couple of exhibits if I can approach and just pass them down. Is that okay?
Sure.
Thanks, Marshall. Thank you.
All right, again, for the record, my name is Marshall Subach. I represent the petitioner, Stanislaw Jazzcolt, who is here with me tonight. Also here is our engineer and two of the Jazzcolt children. This property is at 5N012 Wooddale Road. It is on Wooddale Road, south of Elizabeth. The original request that we had made in our petition was seeking an annexation and a 4-lot subdivision with some minor variations on the lot size. We don't need to go through the annexation tonight because of the fact that after we filed the petition between the city and myself, we realized that the petitioner had already filed or signed a pre-annexation agreement. So he had built under the county, signed a pre-annexation agreement, and it just never formally went back in front of the council. So that is scheduled. Pre-annexations go straight to the city council. So it is scheduled, hopefully within the next couple of weeks, to go before the city council for a public hearing and an annexation. So when that happens, it'll be annexed. So I don't want to bore you with having to do the annexation tonight. It's more of a housekeeping measure at this point. What's before you tonight is the potential rezoning of the property from the R1 to the R2 zoning, approval of the 4-lot subdivision, and also a variance on the lot depths. Again, the only reason we ask for the rezoning is whenever you do a petition for annexation to the city without a pre-signed annexation agreement, a petitioner automatically comes in as R1. As far as the lot depths variances on an R2 zoning, the lot depth is to be 125 feet. These lots, there's 4 of them. They're about 103 to 107 foot in depth. All of the lots meet the 10,000 square foot requirements for R2 zoning. I saw in the staff report, this was previously brought before then I think it was the Planning and Zoning Committee, as well as the City Council as a 4-lot subdivision, I believe in 2006, and that had been denied. And so the question is, why are we back? Maybe a better CDC board, I don't know. Different city council, but the main reason we're back is things have changed. And what have changed is my client did build 1 residence on the property, and he's currently under a well. And they've had a lot of problems with that well, and they want to bring water to the property. But unfortunately, if you look at my first exhibit, it's not coming up very well in the overhead. So those watching at home, not watching the Blackhawks game tonight, will have to bear with me. But right now, the water is located off of Wooddale Road, actually between Cedar and Wooddale Road. If you look at my Exhibit 1, and the other water stub is actually near Elizabeth and Wooddale Road. So to bring the water to this location, where my client's property is, it gets very expensive. So originally when he had sat down and looked at this from an engineering standpoint and talked to the city engineers, the previous engineer always talked about wanting the water system to be looped. Right now there's a stub at Elizabeth and a stub between Wooddale Road and Cedar. And from the water department, they will tell you they don't like when the system has the two stubs. They like when the system is looped. It creates for better pressure, as well as lower maintenance for the water department. So the original thought was, with the petitioner's engineer, is to run the water down Brookhurst. Brookhurst right now, those residents, I believe most of them are incorporated into the city, but they do not have water and water. They have sewer. Those people along Wooddale Road, most of those residents, and many of them are here tonight, are unincorporated. They don't have water either. So the thought was, from the petitioner's point of view, is why don't we, we'll loop the water, gain that benefit for the city. In exchange, though, we'd ask for the R2 zoning in order to get 4 lots. Why do we have 1 lot now. Why do we need 4 lots? It's to recover the cost of bringing that water. The thought is the petitioner would like to have his children actually build the houses near him. Right now, the entire family's living, if I'm correct, in that one house, correct? And it's only feasible if we get these 3 additional lots. Now, after the notice went out and the initial meeting was, I had the pleasure of meeting with a lot of the residents on Brookhurst, and there wasn't really a uniform that everybody on that street wanted the water. So I'm sure you'll hear those comments tonight that they really don't care about the water, which is their prerogative. Also, after meeting with the city engineer, he wasn't too happy with bringing that water down Brookhurst, because Brookhurst is, even though it's a dedicated city street now, the right-of-way isn't very large. So the city engineer said, Marshall, I really don't want even though it would fit, to have that water go down Brookhurst. The city engineer said, he's okay with it not actually looping, which if that's what the city wants, we will comply. So the real issue here is, should this be zoned R2 or R1? And for those new members, and actually probably those existing members, this is actually an exciting night, because you're going to kind of set a trend for the development in this area. The only guidance you're going to get is really the comprehensive plan and then the surrounding zoning. The comprehensive plan calls that this should be medium or moderate density single family. And that standard is no more than 4 lots per acre. The R2 zoning here is going to meet that 4 lots, no more than 4 lots per acre. What is R1? R1 are these, what they call, the code now calls estate lots. These are lots that are 100 by 150 feet and a minimum of 15,000 square feet. Not many lots in Wooddale actually meet the R1 requirements. Many of the residents on Brookhurst do meet the R1 requirements, those that back up to the golf course. Most of the lots along Wooddale Road, I do not believe, meet that R1 zoning. In our lots, we would have 2 that would be off of Brookhurst and 2 would be off of Wooddale Road. So what's an R2 lot? An R2 lot under the code is a lot that's 80 by 125 with a minimum of 10,000 square feet. It's a good-sized lot. I don't care if you live in Wooddale, if you live in Itasca, Hinsdale, Bensonville. An 80 by 125 lot of minimum of 10,000 square feet is a nice-sized lot. If you look to my second exhibit, this is the zoning map. If you bear with me. You see the red arrow is pointing to a white piece right there, which is right here. And this is the subject property, okay? These are those estate lots that back up to that golf course, Maple Meadows, beautiful lots. This is Brookhurst, and then this is the subject lot, and then these are the unincorporated. And what we're also looking at is, or you need to look at, is what's across the street. Across the street is also currently unincorporated. So if you look at your zoning map, what do you have? You have, and this is the only thing you're going to have to give yourself guidance. You have R1, which is the estate lots along the golf course, and I think those can stay R1 because they do back up to the golf course. But now the question is what this is adjacent, is this going to come in as R2, or are we going to come in as R1? Now, the light brown area around everything is R3. R3 are smaller lots that are 65, which I think by 115 or 125 in depth. A little smaller lot, but again, not a bad-sized lot, what most people have in Wooddale. The primary concern that I have looking at this is long-term is if you elect to make this R1, you take a hard stance that, we're going to leave this as R1, what's going to happen across the street? I previously represented a petitioner who had the property right along here, and I was before this board, some of the same members, and we were trying to get that zoned as R3 to match up with Elizabeth Court. And the board at that time didn't want the R3, and some of the members of the city council, one of my favorite quotes was, hey, this is the gateway to Wooddale, and as the gateway to Wooddale, we want these to be larger lots. I accepted that, the petitioner accepted it, but unfortunately at that point, you had less lots being approved, the development had a stall, and then we had the great recession in real estate, and it fell apart. The development fell apart. So now, what do we have here? In the gateway to Wooddale, we have the Bensonville Park District bought this property as open space, which is a good thing, but to potentially put a park there. So there'll be no development of that piece. So it's all that's left is here. And if we just key on our piece, you could easily say, Marshall, you have R1 behind you, this is adjacent, and you have R1. But if you do that, then you're setting the trend across the street to also be R1. And the reality is, if there's R1 across the street, you're not going to see, in my humble opinion, a developer coming in across the street to do lots that are 100 feet across by 150. There's just too much infrastructure needed across the street to develop that. Roads need to be put in, and most importantly, detention. A lot of concerns you're going to hear tonight from the residents and from the residents that are unincorporated is there's flooding issues, and there's flooding issues everywhere in Wooddale. And the reality is this site actually ties into the rest of Wooddale. Cedar Avenue has a flooding issue. Part of that flooding issue comes from the water runoff from across the street, from across the street from the subject property. It just runs off. There's no detention. It's open space, which from an engineering standpoint, they will tell you that open space is not good for detention. So right now, the people on Cedar, corresponding Iroquois, and get down to Mount Clair Lane, have flooding issues because the water just runs off to the east on this property. Part of it also runs to the west on the Wooddale Road. So you'll hear residents tonight talking about flooding. And again, if you make this R1, I don't think a developer is going to come in and ever redevelop that and put potential detention down or some kind of stormwater management, which really is needed in the area. R2 fits the area. It sets a trend for future development. And it's in compliance with the comprehensive plan, and it's not out of order. It's going to actually be, you would have an R1 going to an R2 to an R3. Now, the city can hire a high-priced consultant. They do that quite often sometimes. And a consultant can come in here and say, this is what the zoning should be over there. But each one of you has the required knowledge and expertise to say, where do you want this development to go? Not just our piece, but the piece across the street. So I will briefly let the engineer talk to you about what's going to happen with stormwater detention and the runoff of the stormwater.
For the record, I'm Ed Parzowinski, registered professional engineer and project manager on this job. The storm runoff from subject property is proposed to be taken care of by stormwater management system. Consists of underground piping, and there's a combination of storm sewer and perforated pipe along west and south side of the property. All the roof drains, downspouts are proposed to be connected to this perforated pipe enclosed with the CA7 gravel. So partial storage of stormwater would be captured in that. And entire system is proposed to be connected to the storm sewer along Brookhurst Lane. There would be no runoff of the property except to the inlets and catch basins that are proposed for Lot 1, 2, 3, and 4. Additionally, there could be permeable pavement introduced to the site, such as brick pavers for the driveway to minimize runoff from the driveway. I just want to stress again that there will be no water pushed off the site to the neighbors. Everything will be captured to the stormwater management system, connected to Brookhurst line and underground French drain system.
As far as the lot coverage, we're not asking for any variances tonight as to the lot coverage. We would meet the code requirements, which I believe is 30% lot coverage with respect to each of the lots. So after the engineer came back from the city and said he really doesn't want the water to go down Brookhurst, we went back to my client, and he said that if he was able to get the 4-lot subdivision, he would be willing to bring the water down Wooddale Road to connect it over at Elizabeth to, again, get the city that benefit for the looping of the system. The water would be subject to a recapture agreement, so if anybody along Wooddale Road, and they don't have to, but if they wanted water, they would be able to tap into that water, pay the required recapture fees, and then actually at that point, the city would probably require them to annex into the city of Wooddale. As far as there's 8 factors which the board is supposed to consider and whether to grant a variance. And the first factor, and I'm really just focusing on the water, the first factor is whether or not the property owner can yield a reasonable return, and the reality is they cannot because of how far the water has to be brought to this lot, and nobody else, the city has no obligation to bring the water, there's no other developer coming forward, Bensonville Park District's not going to bring the water, nobody else is going to bring the water to those other people along Wooddale Road. So in order to get a reasonable return on that, my client has to get 4 lots out of this. The next requirement or factor is whether or not the variance is just for convenience purposes. And again, this request is not for convenience purposes. It's to alleviate some of the costs and the hardship of my client dealing with the well that they've been dealing with for the last 5 years? 7 years. The next factor to consider is whether or not this variance request was caused by the petitioner. And again, the lack of water or the location of the water are 2 things that were not caused by the petitioner. The next factor is that the granting of the variance will not be materially detrimental to the neighborhood. And again, I would say that the granting of the variance will actually bring an improvement to the neighborhood because they're now going to have water closer than they ever did in order to potentially maybe hook up if they so elect. But also having the water across Wooddale Road will hopefully enhance or promote some type of development long-term of this across the street. The next factor is whether or not the variance will adversely affect the neighborhood. And again, there's going to be a minimum impact on traffic. 2 of the lots will be on Wooddale Road. 2 of the lots will be on Brookhurst. There's already, with even out this request, I believe staff commented that we could have 2 lots. So as far as the number of lots off of Brookhurst, you're only adding 1 additional lot. And for residential traffic, you typically look at, everybody leaves in the morning to go to work, hopefully, and then comes back. So there's not many trips on a residential development of this magnitude and size. The next, and also with the water, you can ask the fire district how much they'll appreciate having the water closer to this property. Next factor is whether or not it's going to alter the local character. And the question there is, well, what is the local character? I contend that the local character is the quality housing that you already have there. There are some fabulous homes along Brookhurst on these large lots. Some very, very large homes. I bet you some of them get to maybe 6,000 square feet in that area. You're not going to see those types of, some people always use the McMansion terms. You're not going to have these McMansions over there, but what is in common in this area is quality housing. And by allowing for the additional 3 lots, you're going to get some quality housing that is going to mix in well with the local character. The next factor is whether or not it's in harmony with the code and the plans of the city. And again, the only thing we really have to do is look to the comprehensive plan, which says this should be developed as a medium low density, which is no more than 4 lots per acre. And the last factor is whether or not we're saying grant this because you granted similar nonconformities in the city. And that factor doesn't apply here because we're not pointing to anywhere else where you have granted a variance, and therefore we pound our fists on the podium and say, you need to grant us the same variance. As far as the staff report, let me first say that I was very upset when Ross left. He was a big loss, but Jennifer has been fantastic to work with until I read that staff report. And I was like, oh, boy, now I even miss Ross more because she said, you need to deny this, deny the request. Went back to Jennifer, and I understand why she did it. This is probably one of their first initial larger cases, and she's just going off of what, and she's well-reasoned, what was done in the past. And she's not going to step out, or any staff member is not going to step out and set a policy for the city as to the zoning. That's your job and the job of the city council. So what I'm asking you tonight is to set that policy of, do you want this to be developed R1, or do you want it to be developed as R2? The easy decision, we're going to have a lot of residents that will speak tonight, and they're all going to be against it. Some are going to be residents, some are going to be non-residents of the city of Wooddale. So the easy answer is to say, you know what, the residents don't want it, so we should vote no. I contend to you that actually the right decision is to look at this in a broader picture, look across the street. You know, do we want the Bensonville Park District to come in and grab another piece of property, or do we want to try to help the residents in that area and alleviate some of the flooding, which will happen if all this area gets developed with residential? With that, I'll answer any questions, and thank you for your time.
That's an excellent presentation, Marshall. Yeah. But you know, I was on the board before when we denied this, and you had a lot of what ifs in there. What if we bring the water? What if we have a dead end main? Your engineer says you got the permanent pavers for the driveways. Permanent pavers, they finding out now, don't work in the wintertime. So you're going to have so you're not going to have the storage capacity that you're hoping for in the wintertime when you get the freeze-thaw cycle. I've met with some of the neighbors on Brookhurst, and here you have an old established neighborhood. You have the established lots, and by putting 4 houses on this one lot, in my opinion, would be you're going to ruin the whole ambience of that whole area there. And I really can't see the owner running a 8 or 12-inch water main to hook all this stuff up there, you know, and because you'll never recapture it on there. And for the thing of saying that, oh, I'm going to build these 3 houses for my family to live here, have a family complex. But you know, Marshall, over on South Cedars or South Central, you know, we had the same builder come in, him and his brother. Oh, we're going to build this complex and we're going to live here forever. As soon as the last brick was put in, that for sale sign went up on there, you know, and you know, this board got snookered, and so did the city council. So, and I don't think this board should worry about whether this guy's going to have a financial gain on there, because I think everybody is sitting in his room here, whether they got a stock or a IRA or a 401k, is the fact that they're not going to get the return on their money that there. So I don't know. I can't see where it's any different than it was 6 years ago.
I can respond briefly, Mr. Chairman?
Sure.
With respect to what the engineer said on the pavers, we are not asking for any variances on the lot coverage. We're going to meet the code, which is allowing 30%. In my discussions with the city engineer, we are not required to do any detention basins on site because we're not disrupting that much of the impervious surface with the additional houses. Everything's going to be kept on site, but I mean, that's final engineering. But I think what the engineer was saying was if needed, but they're not going to build the size houses that's going to require any kind of variances for the lot coverage. So if they wanted to go actually 30% of the total lot, and they only had 2 lots, which I think the code just allows for them, the next house could be enormous, and the amount of lot coverage between four houses and two, it's gonna be the same, because it's a percentage, you get the 30%. And with respect to what's changed, I think what's changed is I do want the city to look across the street, and if the city's happy with the flooding issues across the street and the non-development and the great open spaces, that's fine, that's their prerogative, but it's not gonna solve the flooding issues of the residents that happen in that area.
Yeah, well, that's,
And I know it's a hard thing to grasp, because every time,
yeah, you're kind of stretching it a little bit there, Marshall.
no, I'm looking long-term as to what is gonna go across the street, so.
No, okay, where does the water the water comes from the Forest Reserve District on the east side of Wooddale Road. That's where most of the water's coming from. And plus the fact that, you're trying to tell me that if you have an open lot, it's gonna, how would I say this? Okay, if you're building a house on there, you're gonna have runoff off the roofs and everything like this, and you won't have the ground to absorb this water.
Absolutely, but when the lots are graded and graded properly, and there's basins put in to catch it through these French drains,
because the size, the stormwater detention, it's not required. So if you put a bigger home on bigger lot, that would not require detention. We are proactive and want to take care of the residents and any additional runoff from the property. That's why I'm proposing this. And I built similar systems in Winnetka, up in north, and Highland Park, and they successfully in operation for 13 years now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Does any other member of the commission have questions?
We're going to hear from, are there other people
Oh, yes,
accepted to
well,
speak?
For these two guys here.
Oh, for the engineer then, if you will, you just made a statement about that if there were larger lots, that there would be no requirement for stormwater drainage?
there's no requirement for stormwater.
Detention. That's not correct, because the stormwater has, there has been an ordinance established about 3 years ago that no matter what your size of your lot is, there will be some requirement either to do detention or to contribute to a detention off-site. And I believe that was passed approximately 3 or 4 years ago. So
When I had
whether it be
conversation-
smaller lots or larger lots, I don't think that would be an issue.
No,
There
but my
should be.
conversation with the city engineer was that, based upon the size of this development, we have to take care of what's on our lot. We don't need to build a detention basin or to a fee in lieu for detention off-site.
Roy, I know you were on the Stormwater Committee at the time, and I believe that that ordinance was passed. But let me get back to a couple other
Sure.
questions, Marcia, if I can. Assuming for just a minute that this property currently is not annexed, so you're asking for a variation, you're asking for a change in zoning and a variation, because under all annexations, R1, all annexations come in as R1. Now,
Correct.
you are not currently annexed, but you have a pre-annexation agreement?
As a formality, we're not annexed. For housekeeping measures, it's got to go before the city council for the annexation. The only reason it didn't get done before was, I think, an oversight on both sides. Nothing malicious on either side. It was just that all the paperwork was signed. You got the permit under DuPage County, and then it's just that final step didn't get completed.
And the pre-annexation agreement would be in Wooddale. And what would be the zoning under that pre-annexation agreement?
It's R1.
It is R1, okay. Based on just that concept that you came in, you're annexed into Wooddale, and you are R1, forgetting your request right now for just a moment, how many homes would you be allowed to build under that pre-annexation agreement under R1?
I think in staff comments, they thought they could get 2 lots.
2 additional lots, or the house plus 1?
The house plus 1.
Okay. So you would have 2 lots versus the 4 lots.
Correct.
The home that currently exists there, and would the lots then run from Wooddale Road all the way to Brookhurst Lane? Would they be subdivided in that manner?
If it was a 2-lot subdivision?
Yes.
We don't have a plan for a 2-lot subdivision, so I can't tell you how, I don't think they would do a two-lot subdivision.
Okay. But if you have a pre-annexation agreement, you get annexed, you are gonna be annexed as R1. So, and I have a question for our own attorney, is that, are we being asked to make a judgment before we should be making the judgment? The property is not annexed as R1, or it may be annexed as R1. We're asked to rezone it, and we're asked to make a variation on property that is not in Wooddale currently.
Well, Dr. Madonna, in this situation here, if the Community Development Commission were to make a recommendation to approve the rezoning and the variation, that very obviously would be subject to the condition that the property be annexed to the city. So if you would approve it, it would be my recommendation that you make it expressly subject to that condition. Does that answer your question?
Somewhat.
Okay.
It seems to me that we're putting the cart before the horse. That's
Well,
all.
The property would come in, and this would be a simultaneous action. It would be annexed, it would be at the moment of annexation, it would be R1, and then with the approval of the of any recommendation to rezone the property and grant the variation, it would become then R2 with the variation. It's generally kind of a simultaneous process.
Okay. I'll accept that for now. Another question, Mr. Zubak, if you will. You were talking about water having a recovery. If you run the line down Brookhurst Lane, are you expecting a recovery from anyone else who would hook up to the water line?
A recapture.
A recapture agreement?
Yes, but the city engineer did not want it to run down Brookhurst.
Okay, if you
So
came
it-
down
the
Wooddale Road?
Wooddale Road, yes, it would be subject to a recapture.
Okay, but the basis of your request seems to be that the reason that you need the R2 zoning in the 4-lot subdivision is to cover the cost of the water main.
Right, there is no
And yet-
guarantee that anybody along Wooddale Road will ever,
But you do have a potential for getting a return back on the recovery, on the recapture.
assuming those residents wanted to annex to the city of Wooddale and get the great city services that residents for the city of Wooddale get.
Okay, that's all I have for now, Mr. Chairman.
Is there any other questions? Okay, we have several cards up here. Mr. Peter Longo.
Would you raise your right hand, state your name, address?
Peter Longo, 5N046 Wooddale Road.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Thank you for this opportunity to speak. Oh, I'm sorry. That's okay. This one right here? Okay. Thank you for this opportunity to speak in opposition of this particular zoning petition. I was here 5 or 6 years ago when it came up before. I live in one of those small kind of substandard houses that the attorney was referring to. Well, it isn't one of the big, lavish, beautiful homes over there. I've been there 26 years. I bought that home because of the ambiance and because of the spatial advantages that it gave me. All my neighbors have large lots. I could buy a city house anywhere. This particular area of Wooddale is very, very unique, and you have to go all the way to Michigan if you go east to find another road that houses the same kind of ambiance. The zoning is R1 for a reason. It was R1 to keep exactly what this petition is asking for from happening. For having builders come in, see open land, take it, and build as many homes as they can on it, destroy the neighborhood, and move on somewhere else. When we were here a few years ago and the attorney mentioned this land over here that his client was Scott Klein Builders, he bought 5 acres there. He bought another acre and a quarter just up the street, across the street from where Stanley lives now. He wanted to put 18 homes there. There were only 2 before. Stanley wants to put 4 on a place that only had 1. If that had been approved then, we would now have 22 very large-size homes and 50 to 60 automobiles going in and out every single day. I don't think it takes a real college graduate to figure out what destruction to that area that would be, not only because of the population, but of the danger and the safety to pedestrians and the auto traffic going in and out of that particular area. There would be more congestion, more noise, more pollution. I work on a golf course. I'm a professional golfer, and I've been on golf courses all my life. That particular green space that you have right there, and we've made many studies about green space, that green space in that little area right now can return enough clean air to support about 22,000 people. If, as the attorney says, in the future he'd like to see all of that developed and have nice homes in there, well, you can tell what the environmental impact on that would be in that particular area. We have a lot of areas where homes are stacked one against the other. This is a very, very unusual place. As far as our property values would go, if there were 4 big homes over on Stanley's property, the people who come and would want to buy my house or somebody else's house, all those beautiful homes on Brookhurst, they're looking for that very precious and very quickly vanishing areas where they can have some amount of land where their house is on. There's a bigger issue here, however. The issue is really, what is the purpose for Stanley's 4 homes there? He wants to bring water in, and he wants to defray that cost at our expense. The bigger issue than that is if you grant this, you have no more legal precedent to stop any builder from coming in and taking care of the entire neighborhood. That whole neighborhood would disappear. It's been that way for a long time, and all of us who live there, there are 10 other property owners in that area, and you won't find one of them come up here and say they're for Stanley's petition. They're all against it for a real good reason. We pay a lot of money in taxes. Every single home there is kept to a very high quality of landscape. It's done for a reason. We love our neighborhood there. This threatens to destroy exactly what we've been paying for and taking care of for many, many years. Stanley wants to bring water in. He says his well is very bad. And he said the well is poison. I talked to him personally. And I told him, I don't know what water reservoir his well is tapping into. It has to be the same one that I'm tapping into. I only live 2 houses south of him. And everybody in the neighborhood has decent water except Stanley. My water out of the well, it's rusty and it smells. I put in a $2,000 ionization and oxygenation tank, and my water's very good. All the rest of my neighbors have the same thing. So I don't know what the issue is on his property, but to bring water in and then defray that cost by putting in more homes, which destroys the other 10 properties, to me is beyond the pale. I can't think of any other reasons, any good reasons that have changed over the attorney said things have changed. Nothing's changed. Nothing's changed since 6 years ago. It's the same neighborhood that it was then. There are the same amount of people who would like to buy in that particular area if they could get a hold of a property that had at least a half an acre of land around it. They can find properties that don't have that kind of land anywhere. And I also don't understand the water runoff. I'm not a college graduate, but it doesn't take a college graduate to figure that if you take dirt and you put concrete in it, water's not going to seep into concrete. It's going somewhere. We have a lot of problems at the golf course right next door to you, and we have all dirt. But the real big issue is those of us who live there are going to have to pay in property value, in ambiance, in our living style for just one man who wants to bring water in and build 4 big homes that don't look anything like anybody else's home there. And we will then be subject to any builders who want to come in, reclaim the land, and just put stacked housing there. There's a real good example, Mr. Chairman, that you mentioned over on Oak Meadows Drive by Central Avenue, where there were only a few small homes there years ago. And builders came in and they put up 8 very large homes that are very close together, and that is one of the ugliest sights I have ever seen. There's garbage cans out front, there's cars parked out front. Every home has at least 2.5 cars. So Stanley puts up 4 homes there, you've got 10 cars at least going in and out of there. That site over there should just make the zoning commission just look at it and say, you know what, we've got to keep this from happening. This is nothing personal to Stanley. I know him. He has what he desires. His desires are sincere, and so are mine, and so are my neighbors. And we are very much against this. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you. It looks like Fred Poncini.
Would you raise your right hand, state your name and address?
My name is Fred Pruim. The address is 5NO80 Wooddale Road.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do. Thank you for hearing me, and I appreciate it. I've been here before the last time they tried to have a property moved across the street from us. I am 4 doors down from Stanley's residence, and Pete did such a great job of outlining what's happened in our area. I'd like to talk about something a little different, and that's the flooding problem. Wooddale has had major problems. We're right on the edge of that, but we control the water feed off from Wooddale Road that comes into our homes, to our yards, and it flows down both sides of the street where the development he's proposing is. When he first bought his property, he had a major flooding problem in his yard. And to address the flooding problem, he brought trucks and trucks of topsoil to raise the level of his land. The purpose was that the water is coming from the golf course runoff where the trees are, and it continues to come, and he could only defeat it. So if he would take away the ground and the soil and the grass that eats up the water and put cement, driveways, foundations, and these 3 new homes, the problem would be much worse. Therefore, I think if he had 1 home, this would be a livable situation, but not 4. The second part I'd like to bring up is the water line. I've talked to some engineers. My son is a civil engineer, and he told me that if Stanley would like to run the water line and pay for it himself, it would be a doable deal, but though very expensive. And I don't know if the city of Wooddale is willing to be prepared to pay for that, because I know all of the residents that I live with will not pay for city water, and most of the people live in Wooddale, and they've never been offered city water, and they have their own wells. And Stanley cannot move forward with the 4 homes if he doesn't supply water, because he cannot go with wells in that zoning of 4 homes. So because of that, I'm totally against it, and my neighbors are as well. And we do not want to partake in any cost for this water line. And that's all I have to say. And thank you for hearing.
Is there anybody else who'd like to speak on this issue? That's all right. Just state your name up at the podium there.
Would you raise your right hand and state your name and address?
My name is Joe Bonsanto. I live right next to Stanley, and I'm at 380 South Wooddale Road.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole
Oh,
truth,
yeah.
and nothing but the truth, so help
Oh,
you
yeah.
God?
My question is, if two more houses are built right next to me, how tall are they going to be? 30, 40 feet in the air? 50 feet long? That's going to take up my front yard, side yard, and my backyard. I don't like that. I also don't want runoff coming over to me. I don't want extra cars running in and out of the driveways. Everybody says there's going to be 1.2 cars, right? No. You got a family of 4, you're going to have minimum 3 cars. Without a doubt, 3 cars. I don't think you should pass this. What we have there is a country-type environment. All the trees will be cut down to put homes in. If any one of you have ever gone there, you'll see what I'm talking about. This makes me very angry, and I thank you for listening to me.
Is there anybody on the commission like to cross-examine any of the, anybody? Mr. Zobak, would you?
Just to respond to this question of the height would meet all the requirements, whatever the code allows. We're not looking for a variance on the height. And to Mr. Longo, I didn't mean to say that your house was not nice. I said there was the common theme in that area is quality housing, and that includes the houses on Brookhurst as well as the houses that are unincorporated along Wooddale Road. So I didn't mean to offend you, and you took that.
Right, well, sir,
Sure.
Mr. Zobak has some.
So again, I wasn't trying to offend you, and I thank you for teaching me my golf swing as a young child. I need to still work on my draw, though, but I appreciate your help when I was a youngster. Thank you.
John, is there any recommendation from the, regarding this petition?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, staff recommendation would be against, supporting recommendation. Go ahead.
Is there any questions from the board for John or Ms. Hennigan?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
I have a letter from the Forest Preserve District that I need to read into the record.
okay.
Dear Mr. Sy, the Forest Preserve District of DuPage County recently received notice of an annexation, rezoning, and variation request on the Jazzcole property. We appreciate receiving timely notification of such projects that may have an impact on our adjacent property, and thank you for the opportunity to comment. District staff has reviewed the public hearing notice and the requests and has the following comments. This property currently appears to contain a significant number of trees. In order for 3 additional residences to be constructed, it would appear that most of the trees would need to be removed. In addition, construction very close to the property line would likely damage the roots of some of the trees on the adjacent publicly owned Forest Preserve property. Staff recently inspected our property and found that 2 mature bur oaks and 1 mature American elm are near the property line adjacent to the undisturbed part of the current parcel. Their root systems and branches likely extend beyond the property lines. Excavation and construction activities on the subject property will create a potential for damage to and subsequent mortality of trees along the property line. Secondly, there is also some general concern by the district on the broader issue of the possible effects of additional stormwater runoff. This parcel appears to be approximately only 1 acre, therefore it may not be compulsory for the developer to meet the city's site runoff requirements. However, the district remains concerned that the development of 3 additional lots and the associated buildings and other impervious structures may have a cumulative negative effect on stormwater runoff over a broader area. We are hopeful that the city's regulations and enforcement thereof will help foster the type of environment that is needed for the success of the plants and wildlife at the adjacent Oak Meadows Forest Preserve, and that the annexation and rezoning actions requested will not cause any significant impacts to the preserve. With this in mind, we anticipate that this preserve will continue to add the quality of life for citizens of Wooddale and DuPage County residents alike. We hope you will allow us the opportunity to review and comment on any major revisions that may be proposed as this project moves forward. Please consider this as my request that this letter be read and entered into the public record at the hearing. Sincerely, Bob Vick, Deputy Director of Natural Resources.
Do you want to see that
George.
letter, Marshall? Look at it.
Yeah, I've not seen a copy of the letter. It's kind of hard to cross-examine a letter, but if Keith can explain to me how I can do that, but
No, I can't, but if you want to review the letter and respond to the letter.
you know, just on the issue of trees, and I know it's always a sensitive issue with any kind of development. Wooddale has a tree cutting ordinance, and my client would comply with that tree cutting ordinance in the future. You know, you got to love the DuPage County Forest Preserve. They have ultimate concern about their property, but if any of these residents go to a DuPage County Forest Preserve meeting and ask them about the runoff problems that their property is causing, or that the Forest Preserve property along Mount Clair causes to a lot of the residents, including myself, issues, their first response is, we don't deal in stormwater detention. We can't address that issue, so we're really sorry that we're continuing to flood the residents of Wooddale, but we keep our open space. So, you know, again, as you know, not always, open space is not always the best thing for water detention and water runoff. But with respect to the trees, we'll comply with the Wooddale ordinance as far as the tree cutting ordinance. Thank you.
Is it your clients that have any questions or comments on that letter? No, the board member. Oh, wait a minute.
No, they just threw me is fine.
Oh, okay, fine. Is there any comments or additional information needed by anybody on the commission?
As to the letter? Anybody?
As the letter? Okay, that'd be exhibit, what, 4? Well, you got 3 from Marshall, so. Okay. Marilyn, that letter will be exhibit 4. Is there any, hearing none, I will now entertain a motion to close this public hearing. Later during this meeting, the commission will commence deliberations on their petitioner's request. I need a motion and a second.
Move that the hearing from request to R2 from R1 zoning be terminated.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Roll call, Marilyn?
Dr. Madonna?
Yes?
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Milano? Mr. Woods? Mr. Petrella?
Yes.
And Chairman Tsai.
Yes. Motion is carried. The public hearing on case number 13-B2/13-Z1 is closed. Second hearing is case number 13-B3 in regard to the petitioner Ricardo and Janet Margall in variation from 35% maximum lot coverage requirement pursuant to Article 6, Chapter 7 on Municipal Code. Will the Secretary please call the roll?
Georgia can now be included, correct?
Yes.
Mrs. Schroeder. Dr. Madonna.
Here.
Mr. Peterson.
Here.
Mr. Milano. Mr. Woods. Mr. Petrella.
Here.
Chairman Tsai.
Here. I declare a quorum is present. John, please indicate when the notice of the hearing in case number 13B3 was published and whether as secretary you have the certificate of publication from the newspaper. Again.
The notice was published on May 6th.
Okay. Okay, I want to swear her in again.
Would you raise your right hand, state your name?
Jennifer Hennigan, City of Wooddale.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. And yes, the sign was placed on May 6th.
Okay. And was the sign posted on the property of the dimensions and lettering size and with the information required by the zoning code?
Yes.
Okay. Is the petitioner present?
Would each of you raise your right hand and state your name and address?
Ricardo Moraga, 398 Spruce Road.
Do each of you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Good evening. We're here tonight to respectfully ask for your consideration for the approval of the coverage variation for the swimming pool. We've been living in our house for like 9 years. We bought it in 2004. We do have 4 kids, and they all love to swim. So we're here to respectfully ask for your approval of the variation, the lot coverage variation.
Well, you've already had one variation on your lot already.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, could we have the petitioners turn the mic on?
There you go. Mic test, mic, there you go.
Okay,
That's
there we
better.
go. You, and I think we almost maxed out on the lot coverage before, right?
Yes, sir, we're aware of that.
Now you're asking for more lot coverage with the,
If you allow it, we would greatly appreciate it.
pardon?
If you would allow the lot coverage variation, we would really, really appreciate it.
Now, you want to put a in-ground pool, okay, in the back of your lot backs up to a retention pond, correct?
Yes, sir.
And there's quite a slope from back of your house down to the retention pond. And if you put an in-ground pool there, the pool will be sticking out of the ground pretty much on the back side,
A little bit.
which it would probably be unsightly for your neighbors across the pond and everything, you know.
Oh, we were thinking of putting like bushes along the side of the, the in between the retention pond and the swimming pool, like some trees or small trees.
Well, I know in Woodside over there, they have kind of a restricted covenant, I think, on some of the stuff that you could put along the retention pond over there. Now, do you have a flooding problem over there when the water, because that's the last pond before it goes out to Route 83.
Right. We're leaving the cul-de-sac, and that's the last one.
Well, that's all the questions I have for now. Is there anybody, any other questions for petitioners? Mr. Schroeder?
I believe Chairman Tsai touched on it. Is there a flooding problem in your
Flooding?
area? Is there a flooding problem in your area? I know
We've been there for
Woodside
9
does
years.
have
We've
flooding.
never had any flooding.
Not near,
Not
near
in our
vehicles.
area, no.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions for the petitioner? Is there anybody in the audience?
Swear him in.
Would you raise your right hand, state your name and address, please?
My name is Jim Wheeler, and I'm at 389 Crestwood Road.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
First thing I'd like to say is, we respect our neighbor's request to put in a pool. I'm also on the Stormwater Committee, and I've been on the Stormwater Committee about 7 years, Wooddale Stormwater Committee. And what I have up here is, this is an actual flood zone map that is used by insurance companies. I worked for Hanover Insurance, and I wrote flood insurance. And what you see here is, it's a little blurry, but I can pass this out. Pass this out so you can see it a little better.
Thank you, Jim.
What I have here is a flood zone map, and this is a flood zone map that is used by insurance companies. And what you see in the blue area is actually the flood zone, which is south. This is the pond right here, the south pond in Woodside. And the subject house, 398 Spruce, is actually right up here, okay? So it's hard to see on this map, but they're actually in the flood zone area, okay? And the flood zone area actually starts in the backyards. So that's my first comment. And this is an actual picture that was taken 2 years ago. I'm standing right at the south part of the pond, of the Wooddale Pond. I'm facing north, and this is the neighbor just south of the subject property. And you'll see that the pond has actually gone up into their backyards. So, seeing how we have problems with stormwater retention, seeing how we have problems sometimes the sanitary sewers actually go into the ponds, I don't think it would really be wise to put a swimming pool in that area, because who would be responsible in the event that the pond were to flood and contaminate the pool? And that's all I have.
Can I ask you a couple of questions here? You
Certainly.
mentioned that you are on the Wooddale Stormwater Committee
Yes, I am.
currently.
Yes.
Okay, are you representing the committee or representing yourself individually?
I am representing Woodside.
But you're not representing the committee.
No, I'm not.
Is this matter before the committee at all?
This matter has not come before the committee.
Okay. So I think for a clarification, you want to clarify for the record, sir, that you are representing yourself individually or some other entity, but not the stormwater.
I am the vice president of Woodside subdivision. So that's,
Not representing the stormwater.
no, I'm not. I do have that knowledge base.
I understand.
Okay. Any other questions? This is Tom Lindelof. He's the president.
Would you raise your right hand and state your name and address?
Tom Lindelof, 380 Crestwood Road,
Do you
Woodside.
swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so
I-
help you God?
I do. Thank you for allowing me to address the commission. The one thing that I wanted to say is, for the past 20 years or so that I've been there, there's been a number of requests for various projects, whether they be decks, pavers, expanded driveways, room additions. We've always maintained the 35% lot coverage because of the sensitivity of flooding in our neighborhood. And I would just request that we maintain that level of consistency in this case as well. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Can you go back just for one more second? I do have a question. Are there any other, I believe it's an 85 lot subdivision in
Correct.
Woodside? Are there any other variations that would bring any of the lots over 35% that you know of?
None that I'm aware of.
Okay, so up to now, as far as you're concerned, Woodside, every home was within the 35%.
To the best of my
Lot
knowledge,
coverage.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
There are a few swimming pools in the neighborhood, but those lots are much bigger.
And they conform to the 35%?
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else which to testify? Anybody on the board would like to, any comments, questions?
Move to close the public hearing. You can do it this time.
Okay. Petitioners, would you like to respond? No? You're fine? Okay. John, is there any recommendation from the staff regarding this petition?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, staff recommendation is for denial of this request for the increase in lot coverage.
Is there any questions for John? Mr. Peterson?
No, I propose to close the meeting now.
Okay. I will now entertain a motion to close this public hearing. Later during this meeting, the commission will commence deliberations on the petitioner's request. Need a motion second?
Second.
Okay.
Roll call, Marilyn?
Mrs. Schroeder? Dr. Madonna?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Milano? Mr. Woods? Mr. Petrella?
Yes.
Chairman Tsai.
Yes. The motion carried. The public hearing on case number 13D3 is closed. The next hearing is case number 13-V4 in regards to petition for amendments, petitions for approval associated with ordinance 1151. Would the secretary please call the roll?
Mrs. Schroeder?
Here.
Dr. Madonna?
Here.
Mr. Peterson?
Here.
Mr. Milano? Mr. Woods? Mr. Petrella?
Here.
Chairman Tsai.
Here. I declare quorum present. John, please indicate when notice of the hearing, case number 13-B4 was published, and whether a secretary you've had the certificate of publication from the newspaper.
Would you raise your right hand, state your name?
Jennifer Hennigan?
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
And was the sign posted on the property of the dimensions and lettering size with the information required by the zoning code?
Yes, the public hearing notice was published in the Daily Herald, and the sign was placed on the property.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, is the petitioner present?
And would each of you raise your right hand and individually state your name and address?
I'm Jack Reardon, 620 Windsor Road, Glenview, Illinois.
Brad Hensley with Landmark Engineering, 7808 West 103rd Street, Hills Hill. Eric Stark with Premier Landscape Architecture, 16W179 Jews Road, in Lamar.
Do each of you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. Hi, for the record, my name is Jack Reardon. I am a commercial real estate broker with NAI Hifben. My specialty is office space, and I've been, my primary focus is on the northwest suburbs in O'Hare, and I've been doing this for approximately 25 years. I appreciate the committee's time. I'm here today to talk about Oakwood Commerce Center, a four-building, 238,000 square foot office complex at Wooddale Road and Pond Avenue. When the buildings were built in the mid-'80s, the typical office space would maybe have 70% private offices, and they were just inventing cubicles at the time. So it would probably be 30% open area desks. Your average amount of square feet per person, which is a way to measure density, was approximately in the mid-'80s about 300 square feet. We fast forward to today, and we now have a complete reversal. A typical plan, minus a corporate headquarters, but a typical office plan, is going to be what they would call 70 to 80% open space, or cubicles, and 20 to 30% of that space would be private or closed, lunchrooms, conference rooms, etc. The average amount of square footage is approximately, give or take, depending on the density, about 150 square feet per person. What Oakwood Commerce Center, its previous tenant was HSBC, and for those of you that have been around, it was Household Finance before that. It was always a high-density use. That's what the complex is meant for, and that's its highest and best use. In a typical office building, about 75% of the employees on any given day will be in an office building. About 25% of those employees are going on sales calls, vacations, sick days, etc. In your former use and the use that we are utilizing the property for, it's about 100%, 95 to 100% of those employees come in at 8 o'clock in the morning and they leave at 5 o'clock at night. Our current vacancy rate for single-story office buildings in the northwest suburbs of 30,000 square feet and greater, third party, is approximately 25%. So 1 out of every 4 square feet is vacant. When the buildings were built, they were built to code, and code with a 70% private office, 30% open ratio was about a 3.3 to 4 per 1,000 cars. So that would mean 3 cars for every 1,000 square feet you lease, 4 cars for every 1,000 square feet you lease. In today's environment, we are looking at a single-story use, and especially at Oakwood Commerce Center, our typical tenant is looking for a 6 per 1,000 parking ratio. And this would go in conjunction with the more open plan, the more cubicles, the less square footage per person. A couple examples of this, we entertained and were close with Capital One for 180,000 square feet. They ended up going to Rolling Meadows. They took a 6 per 1,000 parking ratio. We also toured Chase Bank looking for a high-density space, 50 to 100,000 square feet. They were looking for a 7 per 1,000 ratio. And then the highest ratio I think I've ever seen was Advocate Healthcare, came through for 60,000 square feet and was looking for a 10 per 1,000 ratio, or literally 100 square feet per person. Given what we've gone through from 2007, and we are still going through in the commercial real estate industry in 2008, the simple solution that most people would have would be, why don't you just build a deck and deal with the parking issue that way? The average cost for a parking stall for a deck is about $18,000 per stall. In order to do surface parking, we're looking at $2,500 of surface space. Given the current economics, not only that Oakwood Commerce Center is challenged with, but most of single-story suburban office, the finances aren't there in order to build the deck parking. So therefore, it creates a hardship that can only be solved by increasing the parking if you have adjacent vacant land, which we do not, to go ahead and pave over that and increase your parking ratio. In the past 18 months, I have had approximately 40 what I'll call inquiries, people calling up and asking other brokers about the property, showings and or proposals. Out of those 40, 33 of those were looking for a minimum of 5, and in most cases 6 per 1,000. I had 7 other prospects look at the building, and they were looking at a 4 to 4.5 per 1,000 ratio. We currently have 9 prospects considering the property, with 5 needing 6 per 1,000, 2 have requested 8 per 1,000, and 2 needing 4 to 5 per 1,000. The case that I'm making here is that in order for single-story office space, especially a large park like Oakwood, to survive and for us to get tenants, we are going to have to meet this new market demand. It's nothing that the building ownership created. It's something that corporate America is creating. I tell people that if you could figure out a way to build a cube on top of a cube with stairs, corporate America would do it. So they're going to continue to push this density higher and higher. Having said that, if you look across suburban Chicago, there's about 120 million square feet of space. A 6 per thousand parking ratio wouldn't put you at the highest end, but it would put you at a higher end and would allow us to differentiate our property. On our property, we have approximately 1 acre. What is the green area, 1 acre of land? Yeah. How large? Okay, so there was, when HSBC was there and household, they had daycare, and that daycare used a park. And so we have a green area on the park with some trees. Well, the HSBC is now left. We have no intention, nor is there any operation looking to open a daycare there. So what we are proposing is to take our current ratio on site is 4 per thousand. We have a long-term lease with the Park District off-site across Wooddale Road for 1 per thousand. And we are requesting an additional 1 per thousand parking ratio that would be achieved by paving over the green area and then also adding some additional parking along Wooddale Road, but still keeping the berm in place.
Now, are you going to have 4 individual buildings there, or one?
There are currently 4 buildings.
I know there's 4 buildings, but are they going to be individual owners or individual
No, this is
businesses
going to all be under one ownership still.
under one ownership?
Yep.
No, the tenant that goes in there, you're going to have 4 different tenants?
Well, that's going to depend. I mean, I would love to tell you that we could, I'm looking at one very large transaction that would take 175,000 square feet. That would take 2 of the buildings. We'd actually have to come back in here and build a connector in order to make that large enough for them. But most likely, we have 1 tenant in building 1, 1 to 2 tenants in building 2. I think we'd probably max out at 6 to 8, and we would honestly prefer to do 1 to 2 to 3 more tenants.
Yeah, but usually when people come here looking for a variation for parking, it's usually by the, what the occupant is there, if it's, if it's office or it's a retail or something like this. And, I don't know, to me, you're kind of shooting in the dark and say, oh, we need all these parking spaces. I've been in buildings that, got 60,000 square feet and they only got seven employees, So.
Right. I mean, well, underutilization of space. In our complex in Wooddale, its highest and best use is going to be a call center or a processing type center. That use comes with a high density, but you are right, this isn't user driven, and we're asking for the right to build the parking if we need it. We would love, or my owner, would love not to have to build that parking if we were fortunate enough to not to have a lower density tenant. We looked at IO Engineering, who was a 50,000 square foot lab and corporate headquarters. We were too far away from the train station in Wooddale in order to be under consideration. So there are, in my example here, I give you some exceptions to the rule. The problem that we have is we need to be able to say to the brokerage community and to the tenants in large in suburban Chicago that if we need this parking, we will be able to move forward. And that's what we're here for, is to try and get you to agree with us to allow us to expand the parking if necessary.
So you don't want to put the parking in right now, you're just looking for in the future?
Right, we met with Ross before, we've spoken to John and Jennifer, and we've sat down and said, but one of the things you need to be able to do in the commercial world, there are many people that will tell you, oh, just come on in and we'll take care of the parking. And the tenants have gotten smarter, the attorneys are smarter, and the brokers are smarter. And they're gonna wanna know, the first question they're gonna ask is, have you gone to the Village of Wooddale? You're adding parking. Is this approved by the city? And we would need your blessing in order to be able to say, yes, we've gone through the permitting process, but we wouldn't, and we might add half a car per thousand. It might not end up being, it would depend upon the tenant mix, but we would want the right to be able to do it and in a fairly timely fashion, considering that most tenants have anywhere from, on the low end, 4 to 5 months of lead time, and on the long end, we're looking at deals 1.5 years, 2 years out of occupancy.
Yeah, well, a little history of this complex over there. This was put in by John Stetzel many years ago. And this industrial complex was written up in the trade magazine for it being unique because we saved the stand of oak trees that are in there, and we had a 50-foot setback off the road there, so driving down Wooddale Road, it didn't look like a big parking lot as you're entering the city, and that's the reason why, we have that buffer in there,
Right.
And now you want to reduce that buffer by 25 feet, right?
Actually, I'll let Brad talk to that, but we are still going to keep the berm up so you would not see into the parking lot. We would just move the parking in. John Stetzel Sr., who you know, is the president of the Forest Creek Association. This is an association that is technically active because it has an automatic 10-year renewal. So every 10 years it automatically renews. But it's not a functioning association. It doesn't pay dues. It doesn't have meetings. And John, I had showed Mr. Forrest a letter before, and we still need to work our way through that association to get a vote taken, either to disband the association or get their approval in order to get through the village. But John Stutzel understood what we were trying to do and was in support of it.
Did you want to say that, Keith? Is there any other questions for anybody on the commission? Does anybody in the audience have any questions for the petitioner? Okay. Is there any other testimony you're going to give?
Yeah, if you have any other more technical questions in regards to the parking.
I don't have any.
Okay.
I do.
Dr. Brown?
If I'm reading your landscape plan, I know who is the landscape architect. Maybe you can be sworn in and I can ask you some questions.
You were sworn in.
I was.
He's been sworn in already?
Yes, I have been.
Yes.
I noticed on your plan that I'm referring to L1, L2, 22. What I'm generally looking at is I'm looking at along Wooddale Road, which is where the 50-foot, where the requirement of the ordinance when they were annexed, where the 50-foot requirement was that there be a buffer of 50 feet. 75 feet is supposed to be open space also. I noticed that, how many trees are you talking about with the additional parking along Wooddale Road only would be taken out according to this plan?
I do apologize, but I would have to reference the plan to be able to answer that accurately.
Okay, I came up with some numbers, I think, when I was looking at them individually, again, only along Wooddale Road, and if I'm reading your legend correctly, you're having an X where you're taking out
Correct.
taking a tree down. Okay. I noticed there was 11 in one section, 27 in another section, and I believe in the third section was, look, and I'll tell you. I think it was 30 also. You're looking at approximately 60 trees coming down, only along Wooddale Road is what I'm concerned about.
Correct.
Does that seem,
It's
any number, is it 45, is it somewhere in that range?
potentially accurate, yeah. I would say that there's quite a few trees along the road that would be removed.
Okay, and for the rest of the board, thank you, that was a question that I had. For the rest of the board members, if you have driven down Wooddale Road, and I think Chairman Sy was referenced it before, one of the reasons that ordinance was passed in that manner in 1981 was specifically to keep a buffer to make Wooddale unique in that regard. And from School Street going completely north, we do have every piece of property except one, I believe, has that buffer. And I think that that's my concern. Once we grant this variation, we're not granting this variation to just this piece of property. We're granting a variation that can apply to all of the properties along Wooddale Road, virtually eliminating the 50-foot buffer that we requested in the original ordinance. And that's the only comment that I have. That's my biggest concern.
Is there any other questions or comments?
If I may?
Sure.
So, and again, I can't answer to the exact number that would be replaced. Yes, we are requesting to move into that buffer. However, if you look at the replacement, the tree replacement plan, we're proposing to put in significantly more than what we're removing along Wooddale Road as far as tree replacement. So let's say if we were removing 60, I would imagine that we're putting in 100 along the road there. And again, those are round numbers without referencing the plan. I can't answer that accurately.
If you looked at L 1.2, you just take that one section of Wooddale Road, there were 27 being removed, and I think you were replacing 11 trees were being replaced. So that ratio is not what's showing on your map. I don't
Okay,
believe.
again, I would,
Only along Wooddale Road. I don't know about the
Sure.
rest of the property.
One other thing I'd like to say when we spoke to John and Jennifer is, we're here to work with the village. So, you know, when we do have requests, this is owned in a very large fund. It's well capitalized, and so we want to work along with the village. So if we do have concerns about trees along Wooddale Road, and I hope we've made it evidently clear to the people we've spoken with here at Wooddale, that we want to work with you, and if there are concerns, we want to meet those concerns and alleviate them so we can try and achieve what we feel will be an economic plus. If the building is completely full, I did a quick calculation today, and we should have about 1,500 employees. That would be if we were at 100% occupancy, or give us 90% occupancy, and we'd be adding 1,300 new people to Wooddale. But I want to make sure that I'm clear that if there are concerns, we want to work with you in any way we can to try and make sure it works for both parties.
Well, one of the big concerns is the fact that being that Wooddale's a main thoroughfare, Wooddale Road is a main thoroughfare into our town, and this buffer is not going to do it. Maybe you ought to put up some prairie lights, street lights along Wooddale Road and enhance the property a little bit better.
Yeah, as the broker, I can only look to my landscape architect and parking lot architect, but again, we're willing to listen to, considerations. To us, this is a vitally important component to us releasing and getting this complex back to the occupancy it enjoyed in 2009. I mean, it obviously got hit extremely hard by the subprime lending crisis. The building, the tenant vacated in May of 2011. We're in May of 2013. I've worked diligently in order to get, tenants to come to the complex, and this is a really important component for us. And probably parking is, for high-density users, is potentially the number one or two, along with rent, important component, because if you can't park them, it doesn't make any difference.
Yeah, but the thing is, we don't want to junk up Wooddale Road either,
Understand. I mean, currently we're at 4 per thousand, so I'm asking, if you do it in round numbers, I'm looking for an additional 238 cars, give or take.
Sir, when you mentioned 4 per thousand, is that counting the 910 parking spaces? Or is that counting your offsite parking
The
also?
4 per thousand is what we currently approximately, by the way, 4 per thousand approximately on-site.
On-site.
And then we lease from the Park District an additional 1 per thousand, or approximately 238 spaces.
Yeah.
On the other side of Wooddale
So
Road.
you're actually 5 per thousand counting the offsite parking?
Correct. I mean, the difficulty that we have, if we need to use it, we're going to use it. But the difficulty is, tenants are looking to try and put it on-site whenever possible. It's a difficult challenge for Wooddale and all the villages. This is going to be a trend that unfortunately isn't going to go away.
Any other comments? Mr. Schroeder?
You said that the berm is going to stay where it is. Is it going to stay the same height, or what's the slope going to be, or?
Some of that is related to the landscape architect, but I'm Brad Hensley, the civil engineer on the project. And, by pushing the parking out into that area, we have no choice but to work with the grade that's there. And so we'll be into the berm, and the berm will remain. And then he's going to plant on top of the berm to add more, screening, we'll say, and put back, what you guys are expecting along Wooddale. But the berm, there's some minor grading we're doing on the berm, adding a little bit to it, just as it's needed. But the overall condition of the berm is going to be very similar to what's there today, except what's eaten up by this parking kind of eating into it, we'll say. We have some retaining wall we have to put in certain areas for storm drainage, and so it'll still be a berm.
How will you reinforce that then at the bottom? Are you going to put timbers in, or concrete, or?
We're using right now just a landscape block, which is interlocking, and it's the standard of today for retaining. Yeah, sure.
Is there any questions from the public for the petitioners? John, do you have a recommendation?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Staff recommendation would be approval of this requested variation, and I just want to clarify so that everybody understands this. In a certain respect, this is a variation, yet what this variation is requesting is an amendment to an existing ordinance that was passed by the City of Wooddale at the time this property was annexed and entered into a developer's agreement. So rather than just grant an actual variation, what we're going to be having to do is go back, amend an existing ordinance that was approved and adopted. And this process is twofold. In addition to that, the property owners are going to have to get the majority of the property owners, or if they determine that the association is still active, to actually have to go back and amend the covenants and the declarations
John,
of
not
that
to,
subdivision as well.
not to interrupt you, but we'll let council speak on that.
I don't know whether I'm going to throw a curve at you tonight. Hopefully not. I think I think that maybe you might be aware of this. The ordinance that Mr. Forrest was referring to was based upon a declaration of covenants approved in December 1981 and recorded in April 1983. I can give you specific information on it. But what that says in gist is that there is a restriction against any kind of parking, construction of any kind of parking facility or parking lots within the first 50 feet of the property bordering Wooddale Road. So the dilemma that the commission here is kind of faced with, or maybe that you are faced with, is that were the commission to vote to recommend approval of the variation, and were the council to accept that recommendation, it would be ineffective because of this restriction within the Declaration of Covenants. Our city ordinance provides that we cannot approve any kind of zoning relief that is contrary to legal declaration or legal covenant of record. So that is an issue. So before, as I said before, this could be effective. That issue, and this would involve the Forest Creek Owners Association, that declaration would have to be amended, and you would have to provide proof of that to the city that it has been amended in such a fashion so as to remove any obstacle to the city's actions. I think perhaps there are two sort of approaches, and one is that if there is an approval, if approval of this is granted, as I said, it would be subject to that condition that there be a satisfactory amendment of the declaration, or, and again, I don't know whether you would want to do this, a motion could be made to the commission this evening to continue this public hearing to secure that amendment of the declaration and present that of record in the continued hearing, and then the recommendation, any recommendation to approve that the commission would be made would not be subject to that condition.
Okay, so if you don't, for my clarification and a little background, John Stetzel Sr. is the president of the Forest Creek Association. It's active, as I mentioned. But it hasn't been operating as an association for years. So we do need to go back and find out even who all the participants are, as the buildings have changed hands over the years. So if we should continue this and get this issue resolved either by approval by the Forest Creek Association, or if the Forest Creek Association so chose to disband itself because it doesn't serve the purpose that it did intentionally, we can go ahead and do that.
Well, I think maybe this is something you should address with a real estate attorney. I guess my feeling is that if the association were disbanded, this restrictive declaration would still be made, would still be of record, and in effect, you would be cutting yourself off from any potential way of modification of it. So again, as I said, if there is an approval of this, it would be subject to that condition. On the alternative, it may be that the commission here would entertain a motion to continue this hearing until such time as this issue, you feel this issue is satisfactorily addressed, and you can make that of record in this public hearing.
Okay. Yeah, yes, and I agree with you. We'll ask for a continuance, go back and get the Forest Creek Association and the CCR resolved, and then come back in front of you again. Does that make sense?
Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, at this time, there is a motion to continue this public hearing. Let me ask you this, sir. Would you have a particular date in mind as to when this might be accomplished? If it were not accomplished by this date, it might be possible then to make a further request for continuance.
Yeah, the curveball you described came to us about 4 or 5, 6 days ago, that we really understood what was going on with the CCR. Fortunately, I knew John, so I was able to reach out to him. But we do need a 51% majority of the association to amend this, and we think that we can do that in short order. So we want to try and get through this process, hopefully, with your blessing, with approval, as quickly as we can. And I think with John Sr.'s help, who I spoke with this morning, we'll be able to get a hold of them and do it in short order. So I would say a couple weeks, I would hope, no more.
Okay, so would it be to the commission meeting in June then, or?
June. We'll put it on the agenda for June.
Okay.
Is there any other questions or comments for the petitioner?
Are we just, it's satisfactory what we've just done as far as continuing the public hearing? Or do you want need a motion?
Dr. Madonna, I think you would need a formal motion to continue the public hearing. So it does not take on that it is adjourned and that it's continued to the next meeting, the next meeting of the commission in June.
Make the motion to continue the public hearing until on the Oakwood Commerce Center Variation Amendment to the June meeting of the CDC.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, a motion and a second. Roll call.
Mrs. Schroeder. Yes. Dr. Madonna.
Yes.
Mr. Peterson. Yes. Mr. Milano. Yes. Mr. Woods. Yes. Mr. Petrella.
Yes.
Chairman Tsai.
Yes. Well, I don't, the public hearing is closed.
It's continued.
Okay.
It's continued.
The motion is carried. The public hearing on case number 13B4 is continued to our next regular scheduled meeting. Okay, we'll get right down to the business items. Okay, we will now continue the discussion as the evidence we heard regarding case number 13-B2. Oh,
Mr.
I'm
Chairman?
sorry. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's approved the minutes, I believe, from the
Yeah,
last meeting.
Let me see. Oh, okay. Okay, we need to approve the minutes of February 18th, 2013.
I'll make the motion, since I was present at that meeting.
I'll second it.
Okay. Roll call, Marilyn.
Mrs. Schroeder. Dr. Madonna.
Yes.
Mr. Peterson. Mr. Milano. Mr. Woods. Mr. Petrella.
Yes.
Chairman Sy.
Yes. Okay, now we have the report and recommendation on case numbers 13B and 13Z1. Just hold re-subdivision 5N012 Woodale Road. The owner and applicant has filed an application requesting approval of annexation agreement, annexation, rezoning, and subject property from R1 Estate Residential District to the R2 Large Lot Single Family District, and a variation of the 125-foot minimum lot depth required pursuant to Article 6, Chapter 7 of the Municipal Code of the City of Wooddale. The proposal relief is allowed the subdivision of property into 4 buildable lots. Any comments, questions? We have any motions? I'll make a motion to concur with staff's recommendation to deny this annexation and re-subdivision. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
We have a motion, a second, roll call.
Mrs. Schroeder cannot. Dr. Madonna.
Abstain.
Mr. Peterson.
Abstain.
Mr. Milano. Mr. Petrella.
Abstain.
Mr. Woods. And Chairman Sy.
Well, I don't want it, so I have to see, but yes.
There's the motion to concur with staff recommendation to deny.
Deny? Yeah. Yeah, I recommend to deny.
So your vote
Yes.
is yes.
Yes. So what do we do now, council?
It did not receive the necessary votes for a affirmative. This is a motion to deny.
Yeah.
Did not see, hit the
Okay.
necessary votes. Motion to deny.
You can go ahead.
Is there another motion then to?
Is there another motion on the floor to approve this?
No, there's no more. Let me, since I was the first one to abstain, let me explain my position, and then we'll see if there's other motions that may follow. My concern has been, when I looked at the subdivision, the potential subdivision of a 2-lot subdivision, the house is already built on 1 lot, and there seems to be a potential for another house on another lot. So I'm comparing 2 potential lots versus 4, one of which is built on already, so 3 new homes versus 1 new home, it seems, based on my configuration of the lot sizes. I'm not necessarily anti the R2 versus the R1. Where I have a problem is that we're not only changing the R1 to R2, but we're changing the R2 and making a variation to the R2 that I seem to have even more of a concern instead of taking the 125-foot depth and making it only 103-foot. So that's another concern I have. The concern that I have with the R1 zoning, after looking at it, is that you have Wooddale Road at the back end of the lot would be Brookhurst Lane. So you actually would have two main streets with one lot in between. With the lot, front and back would have a street. I don't like that configuration either. The reason I abstained is I wanted to see what the other members thought, because I'm conflicted a little bit. R1 zoning, I think, is what we've talked about always in that area. Well, the one proposal, as Marshall brought up, was for R3, which was the 18-lot subdivision, which was turned down anyway. So if you look at strictly the zoning, I'm not as concerned as much as the R1 versus R2. I think 4 lots in that area is not a major, 10,000 square foot is not a, certainly I think if we had 10,000 square foot and all the lots in Wooddale, we would be at a premium subdivision, premium area. But to change the variation of 125, I have a great concern with. And that's why I abstained. Now, I believe there may be another motion coming.
Is there another motion on the floor?
Go ahead, I thought you were gonna do it. No, okay. So currently, Mr. Chairman, as the motion now fails, the petition fails because it did not get an affirmative vote. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Would there be, okay, so no one is going to make an additional
I don't
motion
know
on
about
it?
the rest, but not me.
Nobody is going to make any kind of motion as to part of the request or not?
I would recommend my recommendation in the form of a motion would be to recommend to City Council to agree with the recommendation of staff, with especially highlighting the variation request from the 125 to the 103. So therefore, I would vote against the, what is it, a special use? No, against the rezoning. The annexation itself is going to fly on its own. I mean, I'm very confused. When I sat on the City Council, you did not take a zoning matter until after the annexation was approved. Because if the annexation's not approved, there's no sense us even sitting here. So I'm using some past experience maybe to make a decision, but my decision would be is that because of the variation, I could not approve the R2 request. Does that help?
Okay. We have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
Is there a motion on the floor?
You made
That
as
was
a
my motion, yes.
I'm
To-
sorry, I'm sorry.
Yeah, my motion then would be to reject the petitioner's request for R2 zoning based on the request for the variation from 125 to 103, 104, whatever that number was. Does that help?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
We need a second.
Mr. Peterson seconded.
Mr. Peterson? Okay, a roll call. Mrs. Schroeder? Oh, no, you can't. Okay. Dr. Madonna?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Milano?
Yes.
Mr. Woods?
Yes.
Mr. Petrella?
Yes.
Chairman Tsai?
Yes.
So it goes to the council, or it goes as a recommendation to deny based upon the requested variation.
Okay. Okay, the second one is case number 13V3. This is the one at 398 South Spruce. We filed a petition for a variation from the 35% maximum lot coverage to allow the construction of an in-ground pool. I believe we heard enough from the homeowners association to I'll make a motion to deny this variation.
I'll second.
Any question? Roll call.
Mrs. Schroeder?
Yes.
Dr. Madonna?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Milano? Mr. Woods? Mr. Petrella?
Yes.
Chairman Tsai?
Yes. And case number 13B4 is continued. to the next available meeting. There is no other business. A motion to adjourn.
One of the new members.
Motion to adjourn.
Do we have a second? Mr. Woods? Second. Okay, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.